Hey AfterBuzzers, welcome to an all-new edition of Spotlight On here at AfterBuzz TV. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Janet Varney. You guys probably know her from things like Birding Love, You're the Worst, so much more. She is honestly one of the funniest women in comedy in Hollywood. We have so much to talk about, so stay tuned.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AfterBuzz TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Hello everyone, thank you again for tuning into this special edition of Spotlight On here at AfterBuzz TV. I'm Sam Davidson. You can find me at SamD43 on Twitter and Instagram. And we have Janet Varney here, who's very embarrassed by my intro, but I mean it. Thank you so much.
I really did just stare downward and shake my head. Although I was very taken by this BS microphone, so that was part of it too.
BS, I like that. Well, thank you again for coming.
My pleasure, Sam.
For those that don't know, where can everyone find you on social media?
On Twitter, I'm at Janet Varney. On Instagram, which I am not great at, I'm the JV Club, which is the name of my podcast. So the JV Club. And
your website too. You have a website where you can find all of the stuff.
I do, janetvarney.com.
Yes,
yeah.
I really like your website.
It's little paper dolls in this style of this. There's this artist named Divya Srinivasan who
I knew it was
did
cool
it for me. Yeah, she's done all this rad stuff. Like I feel like she's done she animated like a spoon video and just like if you look her up, her resume is one of those resumes where you're like, how are you the coolest person in the world associated with like all things education and entertainment? She's very cool.
Someone in the chat, Isaac Espesin, said, it's Korra.
That's also true.
Yes.
That's also true.
She is Korra, but a lot of other things. Before we start talking about your career now, I want to talk about, how you got here. I know everyone has a unique story.
I just took Burbank Boulevard down the...
Yeah. You just
That's a how did you get here? God,
yeah,
I will see myself out. That was
not
okay. That's a dad joke.
That was a dad joke.
That's a straight up dad joke.
But it was a joke because it was a dad joke, so it wasn't the joke that was bad. It's the dad joke is bad.
Yeah, let's blame dad for that.
Yeah, I blame dad for everything. You know, always do. So yeah, like how your childhood, kind of how you got here, and what your plan was. I always like to know what was people's plan when they moved here.
Can I ask you something? How often do people have a plan? Would you say that that's a consistent thing? Are people planners, especially in this business? Because some people really are.
Yeah, they think they're gonna know.
Yeah,
that they know. But then, so you just kind of came.
So
here.
they had a so someone else, and we will get to me, I promise. But someone else would say like, well, my plan was I was gonna da 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 da, and but it didn't turn out that way. But it turned out even better. Or I guess I'm not gonna say on a show it turned out worse. But
well, you can say that too.
I mean, this is a place where we can be honest and blame our fathers.
Yes,
I have a great dad. But
me too. Love him. But yeah, he was just emailing me, pissing me off. So whatever.
Shout out to our dads.
Yes.
Also very lame to do. Shout out to your dads.
Hey, Dad.
But seriously, hi, Dad. No, I didn't have a plan to come here at all. So everything that I did in coming here was almost like in defiance of whatever plan I had made, which was ill-formed at best. I didn't really know what I was doing. I think I had an idea of what would happen to me.
Right.
It's kind of like I think there's that was sort of, I was living in San Francisco. I was kind of working in the interior design realm.
Yes, I read that, interior design.
Yeah, and so I feel I have a very cute house now. But but I wasn't like, I want to be an interior designer, or I want to, I think I thought like, I would like to own my own store, because to that point, I really had only done those two things. Like those are the two things I'd done. I'd had a couple of jobs in my life. I was pretty sure I wasn't going to open up a chain of movie theaters. That was my first job as a concessionaire. And, other than that, like I had sort of worked in retail, and when I moved to San Francisco, I was working at Pottery Barn, and I just loved it. And that honestly was like the course of my experience became like, oh, I guess I just do this now. What's the next step of this? Like, oh, okay, well, now I'm going to go, then I got a job at an interior design firm and worked as a project manager, and then I went on to be a buyer at this sort of great one-off home furnishings store in Pacific Heights in San Francisco. So that's kind of the course I was on. But it was kind of just like, this is great. I guess this is what I do. You know what I mean? Even though I'd been a theater major and stuff, I wasn't really pursuing that.
Because I get it, being practical. So where originally are you from?
Tucson, Arizona.
Tucson. So, I get it because I'm from Ohio too, and there's like a way that you do A, B, C, and D, and it's just kind of how it is. But I was a theater geek too, but I ran so far. I ran to USC.
Oh, see, but that's a plan.
Yeah, but it's not.
That's a great school.
I'm still like mud deep in my plan. Where I'm at the point like one day, hopefully, I'll say, well, yeah, it's great now, but I'm still getting there. But it's just funny to think when people come out here and what they think and what I thought. And so, sorry, you didn't even get to how you.
No, that's okay.
Moved from, because I get it. Sometimes I wish that I could go back and do the interior design or whatever, whatever it was that I could have done. I could have had my own store in Cleveland.
Cleveland, I have a lot of friends who are very pro Cleveland.
Yeah,
they're from there and they love it.
Yeah, Cleveland's cool now.
Yeah, it is. It's very cool. Rhea Butcher is a huge Clevelander.
Yeah,
and loves Cleveland, and I love Cleveland. I've never been there, and I now love it because her infectious enthusiasm just crept right into my heart. Now I'm like, I love Cleveland, everybody. So yeah,
you need to come to Cleveland.
I gotta come to Cleveland. You gotta come to Cleveland. Tongue twister. But no, so yeah, so I left Tucson. I knew I was gonna leave Tucson. I love it. I love visiting there. I just don't think I could ever live there again. In large part because of the weather. I just can't. I knew from like my earliest memories, honestly, are like, what am I doing here? It's so hot.
It's too hot.
Why are my parents? Why would they? And so when I graduated from high school, I went to college in Flagstaff, Arizona, because I got a scholarship to like an in-state school, and I truly picked like, is there any place that has cooler weather? And so I went to school in Flag for we call it Flag, for a couple of years, and then my long-term goal, I guess I did have, if I had a plan at that age, it truly was just to live in San Francisco. I had been there once, and I loved it, and so for me, and I said this somewhere else kind of recently, I think, but I think I started to develop a theory recently where you can sort of choose, like if you're following a passion or you're making a plan, you can follow like a job or a person or a place. And sometimes all of those things coexist together. But for me, I just wanted the place. I didn't care who was there. I didn't know anyone there. I didn't care who was there or what I was going to do there, but I just felt very called to San Francisco, and I think that happens to a lot of people who move there. And so when I was there, it became like, what can I afford to do to stay here? And certainly theater was not at the top of that list for me. I was very pragmatic about it. So I just, when I transferred and went to SF State and worked full time while I was going to school. And that's kind of, it was like continuing to work on my theater studies because that's what I had majored in. But in the meantime, my real life stuff was like skewing further and further away from that. And it wasn't until towards the end of school that friends of mine that I had met through the theater department ended up forming this sketch comedy troupe. And they really had to like yank me into it. Like it wasn't something I felt comfortable doing. I had never done really any comedy except
but
for
you had
just
done theater,
stuff.
right?
Yeah.
But were you mostly like a drama theater? Mostly in high schools
in high school they do these heavy dramas, or they do big musicals, which my school did not do. We did not do musicals. There was like a chorus department or whatever, and then in theater we never did anything with music that I can remember. And then in college, there were like the music department did the musicals and the theater department did the theater, and they did have an improv group and stuff, and I loved funny stuff, and I was such a comedy nerd, and my crushes were always on comedians and
who was your biggest actors. Like crushes as a younger
child I had a very inappropriate crush on Steve Martin. Like I was very attracted to him as
Daddy.
Seriously. And really, my dad's like great, and he's my buddy, but he's also like my dad. He's very my dad.
Yes.
So there's nothing like bless his heart for putting up with that, because I would have like, Steve Martin's a little younger than my dad, but I would have like big pictures in every magazine cutout I could find of Steve Martin plastered on my wall, where other girls would have like In Sync. I don't know, you know what I mean? It was just not. It was an intense crush. And
have you ever met him?
I've never met him, but I think once I was like in my early 20s, and he was at that time dating someone in their early 20s. Somehow that actually shattered me. I was like, oh no, now it's possible. I think there was something very safe about thinking like, well, this is never gonna, but yeah, I just loved him. And I also had a huge crush on Kevin Kline. Like, just like these sort of great, funny guys.
He just played Belle's dad in Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, I haven't seen the live version yet.
It devastated me a little bit. I was like, no, he's sexy. Look at him.
Yeah. And he was a papa.
Yeah, he was a very old papa, but he was very funny. He was good.
Kev. Yeah. And I wasn't raised around a lot of stand-up, sketch. I loved The Kids in the Hall. I would like rotate my crushes. They would show reruns and stuff on Comedy Central, and I definitely could have rotated my crushes on The Kids in the Hall, which now I'm very close friends with one of them, and I know all of them, and I love all of them. But that's one of those like pinch yourself moments where you're like, how did this happen?
You're like, remember this.
Yeah. Can I? If there was a time travel situation where it's not like I could go back and do any good for humanity, I could only visit my child self. I would be like, this gets better for real. It's like you're super close with Bruce McCullough now. Those are moments I don't want to ever lose track of, because it's the best to still nerd out on people you love. And if you're lucky and you get to meet them in a capacity where like,
you guys, I just
respect,
did this today.
We're doing it right now, you and me, Sam.
Yes, we are. Oh, God.
It's great.
I'm so happy.
But Sam, Jesus, Sam. I was saying before we started the show that I'm super impressed with you doing stand-up. I just think that's amazing, and I love your, like I said, your origin story, your comic book character hero origin story of being a stand-up is fantastic. It's very inspiring.
I'm a big weirdo. Thank you.
It's the best.
Thank you so much.
I'll have to have you on my podcast.
Yes, I would love that.
But yeah, so long story short, I was not going to do any of this, and then the comedy, troupe that I was in ended up, we got scouted by some people from down here, and I was real like weirded out and scared of coming down here, and I just I was very resistant to it. And then once I kind of came down and spent the night on a friend's couch for a pilot season and started getting jobs and stuff, then it was really exciting, and then it was very scary in a totally different way, which is to say, oh, this feels great, and if this doesn't work out, that's really going to be hard, because everything else I had done to that point, and maybe you can relate to this, and maybe some of you guys can relate to this with whatever your passion is. If we get lucky enough to start making a living at it, it has very different stakes than, well, this is my job. It's not who I am. Right. If this doesn't work out, I'll pursue a career in XYZ. And when you find the thing that feels like, I think just maybe this. That's a scary feeling.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, you discovered sketch, which was so cool. I love how we kind of got to hear about your story going up to it, and then that turned into sketch, which is my next topic.
We did it.
So you have created so much with sketch comedy. You've been on a bunch of different shows on Comedy Central with sketch comedy. It's so awesome. And you also co-founded Sketchfest. Can you tell us a little more about that for people that don't know what Sketchfest is? Sure,
and nor should they necessarily, but the hope is that at some point we'll start being more of a year-round and online presence. I have this 17-year-old festival that I started when I was in school with these guys at SF State, and we were in the sketch group. We were called Totally False People, and it was me and 3 other guys, Gabe Diani, David Owen, and Cole Stratton. And at one point, Gabe was working on this amazing one-man show that I really want him to reprise, actually, and bring to LA. He has enough going on. But he was off working on that, and we were kind of focusing on, well, where can we perform next? It's really hard to find places to perform sketch comedy in San Francisco. It was at the time, because you would end up getting slots on like open mics at comedy clubs, and like bachelorette parties would go, what do you do? You're wearing a wig. What do you do? What is this?
Take your clothes off.
Yeah, what's happening? And so we ended up renting out this theater for a month, but we didn't want to perform just our sketch show and have to do it and worry about the money for that period of time. So we reached out to 5 other sketch troupes that we knew in San Francisco that we really liked and said, I know we don't know what we're doing, but would you trust us to kind of put this on as a local festival? And that way we can all share the theater. We all have the chance to perform with each other, and maybe people will be interested in it because there hasn't been anything like this here before. And very luckily, San Francisco is awesome, and it is populated by awesome people who were interested and supportive, and so we ended up selling out almost every show, and And from there, we just started growing the festival. The next year, we went to a bigger theater, and we were able, through like cajoling and wheedling and personal favors, to reach out to a couple of different like headliners from out of town, which were the Upright Citizens Brigade and Fred Willard, who had a sketch troupe here in LA. And then we had people from all kinds of sketch groups in from over the country that second year. And we've really just built it incrementally from there. And now it's this massive, it's crazy. I mean, it's a good thing to start when you're young, because there is this sense of like, well, we don't know what we're doing, but if it doesn't go well, we just won't do it again. And hopefully we won't lose too much money. And because it's just, we don't have money. It was just ticket sales based. And it still really is in many ways. But yeah, now we get to do these great tributes to our heroes and reunions and you know, music and improv and stand-up. It's still called SF Sketchfest because that's what it started out as, but now it's like every form of comedy you can kind of think of.
That's awesome, yeah, because I mean, I had definitely heard of it too in the comedy world, and that sounds like such a fun whirlwind to have such low expectations, I'm assuming, for something, and have it to turn into what it has turned into. How cool is that?
It's great. It's really strange, and I think for a long time, I think my partners Cole and Dave would agree that it wasn't until like our 9th or 10th year that we were able to kind of lift our heads up from just having our nose to the grindstone. Is that a thing?
Yeah, but while you're still working, you know,
well, sure,
as an actress and all this other stuff,
it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's definitely a lot. But yeah, I think we were working so hard, and we felt like we were still working so hard to get people aware of us. The comedy world was wonderful to us, and, you know, people like Fred Armisen and David Wayne and Bob Odenkirk and Bruce McCullough are on our board of advisors, and we're pretty early on. They were early adopters of Sketchfest. But the people of San Francisco, we were hitting like this one audience, and we were just working so hard to try to get the word out further. And it really took us, and I think they say this about having a business, like you have to be ready for 10 years to pass before all of a sudden you like hear someone quote back to you, or you hear a muttering of like, are you going to Sketchfest? And you're like, oh my God, someone knows what it is. Like, it really took a long time for us to be able to kind of take a step back and go, whoa, this is like a thing we made that's still around, and we're parents, you know, and this is kind of cool. This is, you know, this. So I try now, after having that first, it just sounds dumb because, like, of course, every year I should be able to have that feeling, but it accumulated to now where I do try to always step back during the festival and be able to look around and enjoy myself and appreciate it and feel lucky, instead of just, you know, being worried that something's going to not go well, or someone will miss their plane, or, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. I mean, maybe one day you'll take that mental picture we were talking about before. Like, it's so cool that this happened. It's funny when you live things that they don't seem as cool as they are.
So true.
And then a few years from now, even, you can look back and think to yourself, wow, that was freaking awesome. Why was I so nonchalant about it?
Yeah, it is funny. Isn't that true? I think that's true for everyone. Like, everyone. We all feel, and that's the danger of going, well, if I get to this point, then I'll be the person that I want to be, or that's when I'll be happy. That's the thing you kind of figure out, everybody has to figure out for themselves is, and it's a constant muscle, like you have to exercise, that you don't ever hit that. This next great thing could happen to you, and you'll still be you. And if you're setting your sights on something that's always a step away, you're never going to feel, you know, grateful and be present to, like, well, this is great right here, right now is great. You know?
Yeah, I think it's just a amazing message to put out to anybody that watches any of these things, that enjoy the fun stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And you do stuff like us too. You have your own podcast called the JV Club at nerdist.com, which is a pretty big deal, guys. I'm sure if you listen to us, you definitely listen to them. It's so much fun, and I love Nerdist. I think it must be such a cool place to be involved with.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about how it got started.
Well, my podcast has been around for that shocks me. I think I'm on like episode 237 now, and that means at least like 5 years. Don't make me do that math. I know there's 52 weeks in a year. I'm pretty consistent about putting them out. Certainly have not done one a week for the entirety of the time.
Yeah, it's very
been around, but
consistent.
It's pretty consistent. And I actually I actually lived with Chris Hardwick at the time. He and I were together for 7 years, and we're still great friends. Hence, I do At Midnight whenever I can. And he had been doing Nerdist maybe a year or something. And he kept saying, he's always been such a huge champion of me, and he kept saying, like, you got to do a podcast. You got to do a podcast. And I, like many things in my career, as we've covered, and again, maybe this is something you can relate to, Sam, although the way you got into stand-up is like, that's how I want to live my life. But anyway, I was like, oh, what am I going to, there's so many out there already. Like, why would I want to, and then at a certain point I was like, well, actually, no, I really think this would be fun, and it's something that would belong to me, and I know what it feels like to have a festival that belongs to me and my partners and feels like it's not someone else's control, right? It's not that, the studio gives you a role or someone buys your script, these things where we feel like we're waiting for someone else to give us a chance. And I had long felt like one of the things that I kind of avoided about LA and the business was how much like high school it felt to me.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, it feels so cliquish, and it feels like the things that matter are so asinine, like how tall are you, how fat are you, how pretty are you, how funny are you. And it felt there was things I was so worried about the superficiality of it. And all those things exist, but there's also amazing, creative, loving, equally insecure, charming, great people at all levels of success. And so I started this podcast, and at the time there weren't a lot of female podcasters, nor were there a lot of female guests. So I was like, well, you know what, maybe I'll just talk to women, and I'll talk to them about their teenage years. And so that's really where it started. Now in the summers I interview guys. I call it the Boys of Summer series. And I've never gotten tired of it. I love hearing about that time in people's lives. And it doesn't mean that's what we talk about the entire time. But we definitely touch on that. And I think there's a way of getting to know someone differently than you do just prying into their personal life today, or just talking about work. I think there's something very vulnerable and sweet, but also far enough away that it doesn't feel like precious. You can have a sense of humor about it.
Right.
You can laugh about it. You can cry about it in some cases. But that for me has just been like, I just never get tired of it,
Yeah, I agree, and that's one of the reasons I really like your podcast. And even when I think I do that unintentionally. I want to know, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All about those years and who you were. And it really is interesting because the people you typically interview, there's somebody, they have great stories, and it goes beyond that point. But what's funny is that, people say kids are resilient. I was joking with my mom the other day because they were talking about that, and I was like, no, we're not, okay? I'm still talking about the divorced mom.
Yeah.
It's when I was 10. We're not that resilient.
It's
and I mean,
true.
We do bounce back. We can figure it out, but we're still going to hang on to it, some of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the resilience comes from, I think, like being scarred and still pushing forward, and in some cases even using that, and that's what was so exciting. Like, they're just early on, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what people would be willing to talk about. And like one of my earlier episodes, two of my earliest episodes were Christina Hendricks and Allison Brie. And Christina was talking about, being the weirdo in the place that she grew up before she moved to New York, and then taking this huge chance and moving to New York and feeling so lost. And Allison told a story about when she was doing gymnastics and she wet her pants, and I was like, this is wonderful, because those are two women that you see on screen and you're like, oh, well, you're perfect.
Yeah.
Whether or not, that's not to say like that everyone thinks that about those people all the time, but there's a separation that happens when you see someone have success and be great at something and be in the public eye, that you kind of lose track of this idea of them wetting their pants.
Well, speaking of, you're also a great actress. You've been in a lot of really, really fun stuff. And
Thanks.
I know, I almost feel bad complimenting you, but I mean it,
Let me take a very long sip of this.
I really do mean it. And you appeared, I told you before we started filming that I quote-unquote discovered you on Burning Love. And I thought to myself, well, I know I've seen this woman before because I had in Entourage. But it's one of those things that you don't put it together until you see something else.
Sure.
And I thought you were so funny, so I started kind of just like digging on the internet. And I did it with a lot of the actors in Burning Love, because that's also around when I started doing stand-up comedy.
Oh, nice.
So I just wanted to sink my teeth into all of it. But I first want to ask about Burning Love, because for me, that is one of my favorite things. How can you just tell me? I know I used to intern for Ben Stiller's production company. So
oh, nice.
yeah,
Okay.
I know that they did
I like
that.
those guys so much. Red Hour is really great.
Yeah,
it's
Red
full
Hour.
Of great people.
It's a lot of fun, and Mike Rosenstein.
Yeah,
he.
I love Mike.
Yes, he let me. We went out for drinks, actually, like business drinks, a few years ago, and I told him I was obsessed with it, and he was like, "Do you want to touch the hose?" You know, back at. And I literally went and I held the hose, and
That's great.
So for those that don't know, it's a spoof of the Bachelor franchise, and the first season, instead of roses, they gave out hoses because the Bachelor was a firefighter.
Ken Marino.
Man. So yeah, tell me about that experience a little bit. Just for me personally.
No, it was well, I don't know how much you know about I don't know how much people talk about how it started, but it was originally just kind of an on-spec sort of short little pilot that Red Hour had gotten behind, that Ken and his wife Erica had conceptualized, and we just went over to, I think probably Ken's manager, Peter Principato, who represents like the majority of hilarious people in Hollywood, it seems to me, went over and we shot this kind of little, we just spent the day. I don't feel like we got, I think we just all volunteered our time.
Wow.
And did this, you know, we're cracking up then, and then we found out that they were going to pick it up and make it into a show, and it was just amazing news, because you do so many things like that with people, friends, people you admire, people who admire you, whatever it is.
And it's typically for free.
It's typically for free, and a lot of the time it doesn't, even if it's the most brilliant thing in the world, it just doesn't get legs, I guess you could say. And so that's one of the things that you have to get really good at in this business, with almost any job, whether you're a writer, director, actor, makeup person, props, you know, grip. That you're going to do these things that you feel so passionately about, either they're your own idea or they're someone else's, and they just may not go anywhere. You just have to do it and hope for the best. They most likely won't go anywhere. So the fact that we got to make that at all, and then that it did it as well as it did, felt like such a miracle. And I mean, it was a total dream. To me, that was like the coolest kids in comedy for the most part, and
it was like the secret late night club that nobody knows about.
I just don't know how,
with all the cool kids.
I don't know. I didn't come up with those guys, and we all came from such different places. I shouldn't even say that, but I just felt so lucky that I was included. I just felt so lucky. I didn't feel at all like, yeah, figured belong, you know. I definitely felt like, oh, this is awesome. I love these guys. This is so fun. And it was a total blast. It was fast and furious, as many of these things with no budget are. Red Hour was amazing. Ken was amazing. Erica is so brilliant and funny. And all the people in the cast were so amazing. The hardest thing about doing it was not laughing when someone else was being funny. It was so hard. The only other, the other things I can think of that are really hard for me were like doing Kroll Show and doing Key and Peele, shows like that where I think they're so funny that it's very painful to not bust a gut.
Yeah.
But if it's also a terrible feeling when someone's being really funny and you start laughing and you're like, I think we're not going to be able to use that brilliance because a lot of it was improvised.
Right.
So that you don't know what's going to come out of someone's mouth.
Exactly. And I mean, some of your stuff was so funny in that show. And did you know that, I think it was Bachelor Australia? Did you know about this?
On Twitter, people were like, uh-oh, life imitates art.
Yes, because you played a woman that just kept on falling in love with the contestants. You know, you were in the first season and the third season. And yeah, it really happened. There's two women that were on The Bachelor. I think it was Australia, and they got married or something.
I just love that
They're
so much.
They're totally in love. And there's a bunch of other stuff too. You're the Worst. I'm a big, big fan of that show as well.
Me too. God,
and that's
I love
kind
those
of,
guys.
I mean, your characters, is that one of your meanest characters?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I think it's definitely one
There's
of your
a
meanest
history of me
characters.
playing characters like that here and there. But people, there is this sort of like blonde fake person that is very almost psychopathic, you know, that I feel like it's a really fun character to play, but there's kind of versions of that out there. But You're the Worst is definitely the longest and best version of that I've ever had the privilege of playing. It is so fun. Yeah. She's so different from me.
I know. I bet it is a lot of fun. And she's such a nut. But but as the show continues to go on, everybody is kind of.
Yeah,
you know,
it's called You're the Worst. It's like, who's the worst?
Yes.
Everyone? Yes. You know,
because the show starts, it's like, oh no, that girl's the worst.
Yeah.
And it turns out, well, you know, maybe she's actually not the worst.
Well, that's what I say about that show is I feel like it's one of those shows where every character is sort of like someone has a character like a friend like that in their life where everyone else is like, ugh, don't invite him, and you're like, no, you don't know though, you love him. Like there's something about all the characters, maybe with the exception of mine, that you still root for them. You know what I mean? You're the friend that's like, I know, but there's this side of her that you don't see that she's so great. I think that's the show that shows you the side of all of those horrible characters that you're like, oh no, I love that person. What a mess. Get it together. No, why did you make me care about you? But they do.
That is a really good point, because sometimes the show gets hard to watch because you're
when you're like, I hate all of you and I don't care what happens.
I hate you all. Yeah. I truly, truly hate you all.
Yeah, those are tough.
Yeah, we also have Stand Against Evil on IFC. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Oh my gosh. That one is so fun because, you know, I did the voice of Korra on this Nickelodeon show, which is
and everyone,
I've been very lucky. Yeah, lots of Korra fans out there, and particularly in the internet verse. And I still do a lot of Comic-Cons and stuff because I'm so proud of that show, and it really changed my whole life in many ways, work-wise, but on an emotional level. It was that and Burning Love kind of happened around the same time, and my podcast, and I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to just love the things you're working on and be so proud of them. And that definitely falls heavily into that category. But I was, you know, I got to play a superhero of sorts, and I did all this action stuff, and I would always joke, like, this is the only opportunity I'm ever going to have to do this because no one will ever ask me to be in an action show. That's not the trajectory of my work life. It's fine. And then Dana Gould, who's an amazing stand-up comedian himself and wrote on The Simpsons forever, created this show and wanted me to be the lead. And the lead, Evie Barrett, is a sheriff who has to bite. Well, maybe she will season 2. She's really been using her gun and it has not worked, so maybe she needs to fight them. But she does also need to fight demons in this kind of
Freudian
cursed
slip?
town. I think it very well may have been.
Fighting demons?
I think I'm going to see if I can get that written in.
Vampire.
I got to work these teeth out more. But no, it's a comedy. It's, Shaun of the Dead, Ash versus Evil Dead, that sort of vibe. It's a little sillier than like something like Ash. It's definitely less cool. It's definitely sillier and more like The Simpsons, I would say. But I'm in it with John C. McGinley, who many people know from Scrubs and a billion other things. He's amazing. And then Nate Moody and Deborah Baker Jr., who are also two of my favorite people in the universe. And yeah, I get to battle demons and get slime thrown on me and run at high speeds and hold a gun, and none of those things are things that happen to me on a regular basis. So it's pretty great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So it's coming back soon.
It'll come back in fall because we're about to start shooting the second season on IFC. Yeah.
IFC is doing the coolest things.
They really they let people do their thing, which is kind of hard to say about some networks. I think that whole group of, I just did upfronts for that show, which means that you go in this case to New York, and you meet some sales reps, and you meet the rest of the network, and it's supposed to be, I think it's supposed to be schmoozy and unpleasant, but instead it was a total blast and everyone was awesome. But it's the sort of parent group of networks that all were there together were BBC America, AMC, we, and IFC, and like we, not so much because I don't watch a lot of reality television, although they have some huge hits on their network, but like and Sundance. So you have these networks where I was in a room with like all of these people that I never get to work with because they're all on dramas. I watch dramas almost exclusively because that's an escape for me. Comedy isn't that much of an escape. And I was totally fangirling out. I was like, oh my God, that's the girl from Humans. I love her so much. She's so beautiful and perfect. Like, oh my God, there's the Walking Dead people. Oh my God, there's the Breaking Bad people. Like, just all of the, you know, Better Call Saul is like one of my all-time favorite shows.
Those are like almost,
it's
you know,
the best.
those are the cool kids, the
It's the
emo
best.
kids.
Yeah.
Those networks.
Those are
right?
those are all the people and all the shows that, with the exception of I think FX, honestly, because that's what You're the Worst is on, and a lot of other shows like The Americans that I love. But that's the group of shows that I watch. HBO for sure, but
Yeah.
when you look at some of these cable networks where you're like, oh, you're handing the car keys to these creators and just letting them make their stuff, and the audiences get it, and they're very specific shows, and the people who love them. That's what happens when you are a network that believes in your talent and you say, hey, you've got a story to tell. I'm gonna let you tell your story. I'm not gonna let you tell our version of your story.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I want to make sure I give a shout out to a couple people in the chat that have been talking about Korra, asking about it. Okay, so we have Trenton Dixon that said, it's been a long time, but when would you record the episodes for Korra? Would it be happening as the current season was airing? And how long would it be until you saw the finished animation for them?
That's Trin, you sound like someone who knows a bit about animation. That's a very intelligent, thoughtful question. And the answer is, yeah, that we were all over the place. We would be, that was one of the hardest things about doing cons at the time that the show was airing, because I would be recording one season while another season aired, and then I would be doing ADR for like something in between.
Mm-hmm.
So, we had such a hard time remembering what people had seen and what they weren't supposed to know about yet. We would record at Nickelodeon as a group whenever possible. Nickelodeon really believes in like keeping the actors together when it's possible to get that kind of face-to-face experience, and they think that it affects the shows, and I think it does. And so yeah, we would be doing that, but there would be a situation where like I think when we were recording 4, we were like early on in recording season 4, but then I would be doing ADR for season 3, which was going to air soon, and season 2 was still airing. So we were really all over the place, but it would take a long time. I mean, I didn't see the first image of Korra until I feel like we were close to the end, or maybe even doing ADR for the first season. It just takes a long time when you have all that hand-drawn animation, and it's going off to the geniuses in Korea as well. So there's these 2 different groups of people who are doing this amazing work. It takes a really long time. And the cool thing about that when you do animation like that is that you kind of forget what you've done, and so you can just watch it fresh as a fan, and you're not thinking like, oh yeah, that day my stomach hurt, or I don't have to look at myself on camera going like, why did they not fix my eyebrow that's 2 feet lower than it should be, whatever. In cartoons you can just disappear into them and just like be a fan, which is so fun when it's a show that good.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, you were talking about going to some of the cons recently.
Oh yeah, I do them as much as I can because I love the fans. I really do. If I did a show that I didn't believe in, maybe I wouldn't bond so much with the fans, because I would be like, oh, you like this, but this isn't for me. But the whole purpose of the show, and its humor and its warmth and it tackling tough stuff and being not just for kids by any stretch of the imagination, and being inspiring to people, that sort of completes the circle for me of making the show, because once you feel what it feels like to go from reading a script to the end point where you get to meet someone who tells you how that script affected them, it's just amazing. It's really amazing.
Yeah. And speaking of amazing, you also do some really great work with like women's activism, and your role in the art. Let me try this. Elysium.
Yeah, nailed it.
I did it. Elysium Girl Talk. So tell me a little bit about that, because it's super interesting, and it's always nice to hear when people do this kind of stuff. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, there are tons of really great programs in LA and in every city. There's just like if you're in a town that has a population that has people in need, I guarantee you there's some kind of great organization that you can get involved with. But for me, the Art of Elysium is an umbrella organization that does tons of awesome stuff across the board. They bring art into places like Children's Hospital. They do support groups for all different kinds of kids. I've done work with kids who have had kidney failure, who are going through dialysis while they're being teenagers, or kids with type 1 or type 2 diabetes, where they're having to deal with their moms calling them in the middle of the school day to be like, did you check your levels? On top of, as we were talking about, everything that sucks about being a teenager. And Girl Talk is a specific program that's for girls with who are born with cleft palates or who have facial disfigurements. And they can be in all different stages of their surgeries. A lot of times now, organizations will do free surgeries for kids who are born with cleft palates and stuff. And so, you know, some girls, they have like a tiny little hairline scar left. Some girls are still waiting for stuff. Some girls may never choose to have it. But it's a program that they go through where they are getting really positive reinforcement and being taught the tools for self-confidence, and being self-confident in a way that's not aggressive. Because I think sometimes when someone comes at us, I know my initial response is to come at them back, you know? And so this is about, like, how do you be empowered while still being peaceful? Mm-hmm. And there's just so many great people get involved with that particular program. But in general, I can't say enough good things about the Art of Elysium. And then there's also a rad program that is for kids in schools called Young Storytellers Foundation. And those programs are during the school year at elementary schools. Writers and actors will go into the schools. Like, a writer will work as a mentor with a kid for a period of time, and then they put on a play, and actors from Hollywood will come in and volunteer their time and do the play in front of the school with the kids.
That's
and
so cool.
They just read them cold, like, on stage. Like, a lot of them are like sketches, right? That's like 5 minutes. And that's also just totally awesome. And it's great because, you know, our jobs are not necessarily easy in the sense that they may seem easy, but they are sure as heck too easy for the amount of money that some people get paid. Also, we end up being very poor a lot of the time too. But for me, I mean, I come from, like, you know, I went and collected food stamps with my mom at a certain point when I was growing up. So I came from nothing. I have amazing family and parents, but it's public school teachers. And so I 100% hold on to, like, a lot of guilt about, you know, you want to give me how much for doing this voice on the raddest thing in the world? I should be paying you, you know? And sometimes even that's like, I don't deserve $100. Like, I should be paying you. You know, it's not, the jobs aren't always like you. Sometimes you are getting paid nothing, like we talked about. But at the end of the day, that I'm able to put food on the table and do this fun thing, like, I would feel like so rotten if I didn't do stuff that helped other people. Yeah. With whatever skills I can bring to the table. Sometimes even that feels small. It's like, I want to be able to do this kid's surgery. That's awesome. The fact that this person is doing this is amazing. But it just feels good. It really does. And that's it's, you know, that's a very cliched thing to say, but, like, you know, in Scrooge, when Bill Murray is just losing his mind at the end, and he's like, once you get this feeling, you're greedy for it. You want it more. You want more. You're selfish. You want more. And I think that's really true. That's one of the reasons I do the cons, is that, like, I wish I could say, you know, this is purely, it's just like, I'm giving, but it's altruistic. It doesn't feel good. I'm doing it for the better of humanity. It's like, no, it feels amazing. It's completely selfish.
You, like, remind me of an episode of Friends where Phoebe, like, keeps on doing good deeds and she feels guilty because it makes her feel good.
Yeah, exactly. Like, shouldn't this hurt? Shouldn't this bother me more? If it's a truly good deed, shouldn't this feel terrible? It doesn't really work that way, so.
Well, I mean, it's so awesome that you do all that. And again, I think everybody, no matter what you do, should do things to help others, especially women. I love women helping women, and it's the best thing that you can do, and it helps you. It helps who you are as well.
Absolutely.
So I just, you know, look up everything that, you know, Janet just said to get involved in if you're in Los Angeles, and wherever you are, just there's always organizations that.
And if there's not, you could start one. And it could be something that you're like, well, what do I do? Like, I just do this. I do, you know, I have an Etsy shop. It's like, well, you could totally teach crafts to kids. You know, I think that's one thing I've learned is, like, don't be ashamed of what your gifts are. Just, there's a place for you to share them, you know? Mm-hmm. That sounds extremely cheesy.
Always, I know. It's like we're doing, like, an after-school special.
I know.
Guys.
I want, like, a little glimmers, like a star, a 70s little star in my eye.
Well, on that note, is there anything else that you can give us, that you're working on or something exciting to look forward to?
I mean, certainly there will be another Sketch Fest.
What month is that?
It's in January. And we also we co-program other stuff in San Francisco over the course of the year. So, like, I'm going to get to do improv at this thing called Cluster Fest, which is a huge kind of Comedy Central thing that's happening in June. And then we do comedy at Outside Lands in San Francisco, which is in August every year at Golden Gate Park, which is the only place I want to go to see music now because it's like foggy in August in San Francisco. I'm not a Coachella person. As we've learned from my experience in Tucson, I don't like heat. My podcast comes out on Thursdays. It's free. You can get it any place you get a podcast. You don't even have to go to Nerdist. You can just do iTunes or Stitcher or wherever else. And I mean, those are, I think, their main things. That's kind of a lot.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a lot. I cannot wait to see all the stuff that is coming up next for you.
Sam, thank you so much. Thanks
so
for having
much,
me.
of course, and thank you guys for tuning in as always, and thank you all for all your fun.
Thanks,
comments.
guys. I'm sorry we didn't talk more about Korra, but it's awesome, and I love it. And
Korra
it's still
is
one of my
awesome.
favorite things.
It is. It's a lot of fun. I wish I could talk more about it, but I'm 29 years old, and I don't exactly. I've watched a few, but not as many. So
we got to get caught up on this.
I didn't even want to attempt because you guys would have probably gotten mad at me
for
being a Korra ignoramus. One more time, where can they find you on social media?
Sure, yeah, on Twitter at Janet Varney, Instagram the JV Club, and you can go to janetvarney.com. I try to keep that updated.
Yes, awesome. And you can find me at samdavidsonentertainment.com, Twitter and Instagram at samd43. Thank you all for tuning in, and comment and tweet at us and Janet if you want some answers to your questions.
Yay.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.